Hello, my friends of AP Literature. Happy holidays, and welcome to my basement for my video presentation of Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Let's get into it. In 1861, Charles Dickens published Great Expectations, a story of a young poor boy named Pip coming into fortune. Pip's great expectations refer to the shoes that he must fill in order to achieve the potential his benefactor thinks is fit. These expectations are education, wealth, property, and Pip's transformation into a gentleman of England. On Pip's journey of life, Dickens showcases the many different stages and themes of life through the events that Pip endures. The themes portrayed include, but are not limited to, the foundation of life, love, relationships, childhood, teen years, adulthood, and money. 112 years after the publishing of Great Expectations, popular psychedelic and progressive rock band Pink Floyd released their greatest work yet and one of the greatest albums of all time, called The Dark Side of the Moon. What makes this album so special and unique is the band's understanding of the universal human experience as displayed in the 10 songs that make up the album, each song representing a different aspect or stage of life. As I was reading Great Expectations, I couldn't stop drawing comparisons to the two works, so this video is just that. It's an in-depth look of how Pip's experiences correlate with the songs of The Dark Side of the Moon. Just as a quick side note, we're going to be skipping the first song of the album, Speak to Me, because it's a reference to birth, and Great Expectations begins with Pip at age 7. So we're going to go right into the second song of the album, called Breathe, or Breathe in the Air for the whole thing. Because this song refers to breathing in the air of life, it places emphasis on how important the world around a child is to their development. Pip is raised in borderline poverty with an abusive mother figure. This has great impact on his future because he spends as much time as possible away from his home to escape the realities of his life. If he was content with his home life and never left the house, he wouldn't have run into escaped convict and his eventual benefactor Magwitch while roaming a cemetery one day. A benefactor is a person who bestows good things upon another person, so in this case, Magwitch is the one that eventually grants Pip his wealth, property, and education. Although his home life wasn't great, he was still raised to be a respectful young man. His kindness towards Magwitch upon meeting him left a lasting impression on him, so that is what caused him to want to give Pip a fortune. This event lays the foundation of Pip's story, similar to how the events of childhood lay the foundation for life, as discussed in this song, Breathe. Next, we have a song called On the Run. This song features no lyrics, but it still expresses and represents the transition from childhood into the teen years. Pip's transition comes right after he learns of his great expectations. Pip first learns of how this status affects the people around him when he goes into town to buy a fresh suit. Reality sets in when he sees people giving him the best treatment at the expense of others. When he goes to the tailor, the man in charge mistreats his employees in pursuit of giving Pip the best customer service possible. Pip notes that this is the first time that he truly sees the power of money. Getting back into the topic of transition, Pip must leave his family behind and move to London to pursue greater education. He must form new relationships if he wants to be successful, so he treats everyone with the respect that he learned from his childhood, but leaves out any details of his home life in the past. This song, called Time, is arguably the best and most important song on the whole album, with lyrics like "You are young, and life is long, and there's time to kill today, and then one day you find 10 years have got behind you." Time is about the realization of the lost time in life, and the urge to try to catch up, but it's too late. Time itself seems to move faster as you grow older, as I'm sure that we all have experienced. And Pink Floyd's listeners have never related more to the lyrics. Every year is getting shorter, never seem to find the time. For Pip, this realization comes at age 21. He has constantly worked at becoming a gentleman, so other aspects of his life have been neglected. He wants to travel to somewhere outside of England, but has never had the time to. He also assumes that if he had more time with Estella, the woman who he has constantly been pursuing from the age of 7, he would have won her over by now. If Pink Floyd is of no interest of you, please check this song out. Listen to it in a dark room late at night. It will have a lasting impression on you. Next is a song called The Great Gig in the Sky. It's another lyricless song similar to On the Run, but it features strong female vocals throughout. This song can be interpreted as representing many different things like death or religion, but that doesn't really apply to Pip. So in this case, The Great Gig in the Sky represents raw emotion. And as I was reading Great Expectations, I pictured this song playing in the background as Pip confesses love to Estella and begged her not to marry Drummle, someone who is Pip's arch nemesis. He's ultimately rejected, but the showcase of emotion fits right into this interpretation of the song. Money is the next song on the album. It discusses the negatives of money and wealth. Ironically, 34 million copies of this song have been sold worldwide. When Pip becomes educated and starts spending his money, his sense of entitlement grows with the bills. He believes that Estella didn't have positive feelings for him when he was younger because of his lack of money, so now that he has it, he believes her feelings should change. As most people with lavish spending habits, Pip falls into great debt. He has a tendency to spend money that he doesn't have yet, and the debt piles up. This song couldn't be more true during Pip's financial hardships. Next, we have my personal favorite song on the album called Us and Them. The jazz-infused slow rock is, in my opinion, a perfect concoction. Once again, this song has a couple of perceived meanings, but in the case of Pip, the meaning that would relate to him most would be the division from others through disagreement. In particular, the people that Pip is divided from are Miss Havisham and Estella. Miss Havisham is Estella's adopted mother, who happens to be the wealthiest woman in the town where Pip used to live. Miss Havisham's heart was broken after she was stood up on the day of her wedding, so she vowed to take her revenge by breaking as many men's hearts as possible. So she does so by adopting Estella and raising her to be cold to every man that she meets. Obviously, Pip disagrees with this because he fell in love with Estella when he first laid his eyes on her. He lets both of them know what he thinks they're doing is awful, and eventually Miss Havisham agrees with him. But nonetheless, Us and Them, my favorite. Next, we have Any Color You Like, and this is the third and final instrumental of the album, meaning that there's no lyrics on this song. So this was probably the hardest one to take a meaning and apply it to the story, but what I had got from it is the part of life that this song represents is the fear of making decisions. Throughout the text, Pip truly considers the outcomes when making decisions, and the earliest example of this comes on the first and second pages, where Pip decides whether or not to steal a file from his brother-in-law and food from his sister to give to an escaped convict he had just met. Other decisions that Pip had to make that he ponders over endlessly include leaving his family behind in pursuit of his great expectations, whether or not to continue pursuing Estella, hiding Magwitch at his friend's house while he's still wanted by police, and trying to leave the country with his friends in Magwitch to take the heat off him. Next is Brain Damage, which is a song about deteriorating mental health. This song's chorus is the only time where the title of the album is mentioned, and if your head explodes with dark forebodings too, I'll see you on the dark side of the moon. So if the dark side of the moon is representative of the negative aspects of human nature, I believe the album itself is a proposition saying that although there are many stages and themes to human life, it is the negative aspects that truly define them. Does that make sense? I don't know. That's what I got out of it. Anyways, Pip's life relates to brain damage in the sense that he drives himself mad over Estella. Some nights, he wouldn't sleep because he'd be overthinking a meeting that the two of them had that day. He becomes obsessed with her in a short amount of time, and she's the reason that Pip had dreams of his great expectations before even knowing them. Pip wanted to impress Estella and thought he would do so by reinventing himself, which he did to an extent. When he shows to her that he has changed, she still resents him, and it drives him nuts. And finally, we have Eclipse, which is a song about the beginning of the end, similar to this video. Death is near, life is almost over, and now it's time to accept what is going to happen. After Magwitch is captured again and dies in Pip's arms, Pip must now move on with his life. None of the property or fortune can be his, as it belonged to a captured and now deceased convict, and is now the property of the government. Pip is still in debt and is arrested because of it. Luckily, his brother-in-law pays it off. Pip gets a job working for a close friend and makes a decent living out of it, but it is nothing compared to what he once had. In typical fashion, the book ends with Pip returning to Miss Havisham's estate, coincidentally meeting Estella there. Her husband had just been killed, and she was looking rougher than usual because she was a victim of spousal abuse. Because Pip and Estella were the same age and were in similar physical and mental states, this helps prove Pink Floyd's concept of the universal human experience, thus concluding my personal comparison of Great Expectations and The Dark Side of the Moon. AP Lit friends, I fully recommend this book to you, and I'm not just saying that because Miss Ogden is watching this with us. I also recommend the album too, but if you don't want to listen to it, you don't have to. You're missing out. You're lost. Overall, Great Expectations is a marvelous story, and I think a lot of you could relate to the topics discussed. The many twists and turns keep the book exciting, and Dickens couldn't have crafted a better story of unrequited love to accommodate a greater story of the transformation of a character. I wish that readers could have seen Pip fully achieve his great expectations, but that'd be the only thing I'd change. In the magazine, The Atlantic's review of the book, they praise it, saying that in no other of Dickens' romances has the author succeeded so perfectly in at once stimulating and baffling the curiosity of his readers. I haven't read any other Dickens, but I do agree with that last part. In Robert Douglas Fairhurst of The Guardian's review, he praises Dickens' character choice once again, and also his ability to create a timeless piece, saying, "It's probably also why so many of them sympathize with Pip, whose narrative voice involves the perspective of a wide-eyed child coming up against that of his wiser, sadder adult self. Anyone who first reads the story as a child and returns to it in later years is likely to feel a similar mixture of nostalgia and relief. I will read this book again in the future to see if it has a different effect on me in the sense that I can relate to the themes more. So once again, my name is Jackson Cisnowski. Happy holidays. I'm going to sleep. Good night.